Thank you very much. I am really excited to be here. Thank you for this opportunity to come share some really important information about what's happening in education in South Carolina right now. I'm here today to talk about the bill that's currently in the Senate, House Bill 3759 and Senate Bill 419. I have titled this presentation, Child Abuse in the Classroom, and I believe whenever I'm done that you'll realize why I chose that title. So I am Communications Director for United States Parents Involved in Education. We do have a South Carolina USPIE chapter. We have 20 active state chapters across the country, a leadership team that represents 5 different states, and a very impressive advisory board with high-profile names like Michelle Malkin, Dr. Duke Pesta, and the New American International News correspondent Alex Newman, all of which who are experts on education policy. I would really love the opportunity to come back and talk more about our goals as a national organization to get the federal government out of local education. So that is our mission, United States Parents Involved in Education. We're a nationwide nonprofit coalition of state leaders who are looking to return control of education to parents and local communities. Let me just show you real quick the bill. I brought it with me. We printed it out. It's 125 pages. It's a Republican-led education reform bill. And this first part here is just the fiscal impact statement. So it's huge. It's an omnibus bill where they tried to put pretty much everything they could in this. So the bill title is South Carolina Career Opportunity and Access for All Act. And part 1 is titled South Carolina College and Career Readiness Goal. So keep in mind that every time I say college and career ready, that means Common Core. And I have some proof here in a few minutes that shows just that. So the focus of education is no longer academic. It is about preparing children for jobs that are determined by politically appointed boards, workforce boards, and mandated by the federal government. USPIE opposes all efforts to turn American education into a workforce development program system. Children no longer learn, but they are prepared to meet the needs of government to service and attract industry. This was the premise of the bill, is that a vibrant workforce is critical to sustaining and growing the economy of the state by servicing industry and attracting industry. And that doesn't really sound much like academia to me. Students become human resources, which is a Marxist term that was coined by Hegel in the 1850s. And this is what Hitler's fascist regime attempted to do. So the Dear Hillary letter was written right after President Bill Clinton was elected president, and Mark Tucker, who is the president of the National Center on Education and the Economy, wrote a letter to Hillary Clinton in 1992 that laid out a plan for America. And I'll just read it here. It lays out a plan to remold the entire American system into a seamless web that literally extends from cradle to grave and is the same system for everyone, coordinated by a system of labor market boards at the local, state, and federal levels where curriculum and job matching will be handled by counselors accessing the integrated computer-based program. So this has been attempted in other countries, and planned economies are usually associated with Soviet-type central planning, where all of the decisions are made by those in charge, the government, and they're imposed by law. So 2 years after Mark Tucker wrote that letter to Hillary Clinton, we see 3 federal education laws come in place. And so his letter essentially evolved into these 3 laws: Goals 2000, School to Work, and Improving America's Schools. So there was a radical change in education, and elementary and secondary education was reinvented. The focus became preparing children for the workforce rather than true education, and college and career ready was the focus as well. So this is when learning objectives morphed into standards, and there was a big push in the 90s for national standards, which was defeated, and has resurfaced about 10 years ago this year as Common Core. So the standards can only be effective if they are measured by assessments. And this is when standardized tests became mandated from the federal government. Teachers don't like the tests and all the time preparing for the tests, and parents and conservatives don't like all the data mining that's happening behind these tests. So you'll remember at the beginning that I said I would prove that we still use Common Core standards in South Carolina. So this was a report issued by the Education Oversight Committee, and it shows that on average, the current standards in South Carolina are 91% aligned to Common Core. So you'll see the first number is 89%, that's the ELA standards, they're 89% aligned to Common Core, and the first on the bottom table is 92%, that's the math standards, that they're 92% aligned to Common Core. So the current standards were more aligned to Common Core until there were two laws that passed the same year that mandated children learn cursive writing and the memorization of math facts, because Common Core took those out. These standards, they're not rigorous, nor were they developed by experts, and they're not internationally benchmarked or comparable to standards in other leading nations. Sandra Stotsky, she's a professor, Sandra Stotsky, she sits on our advisory board, and she was also on the Common Core Validation Committee. And she's the one that said those things, and she refused to sign off on the standards because of how inappropriate they were, and they were not developmentally appropriate for the age. So the reason this slide is so important is because 5 or 6 years ago, many of you in this room realized how problematic these standards are, yet the federal government and its groupie state governments keep foisting these standards on teachers and students and local school districts. That's okay. Can you hear me right now? Yeah. Okay, sure. Okay, so now we come to the 0 to 20 committee. So in this modern computer day era, digital personal data is gold, and it literally sells like currency. So we have the 0 to 20 committee, which in the name alone is alarming. This originated in the House bill. This committee is charged with collecting data from 0, which I'm assuming is pre-birth, to 20, which is choices made after high school. Representative Shannon Erickson, in a 6-hour House debate when it was on the floor and they were debating it, she says that it's the legislator's responsibility to account for all children, measure them, even mentioning private and homeschoolers. So they want to get data on children who aren't even in public schools. The committee has been struck from the Senate bill, but its functions and all of the data collection and everything that this committee was to be charged with is now under the State Department of Education. So they got rid of a whole new committee, but all of the data collection and functions have just been pushed up under the State Department of Education. Representative Rita Allison did propose an amendment in the House which changed the name, from 0 to 20 to the Special Committee on Revitalizing Education. It just sounds so much better, doesn't it? So they're just rebranding things, just like they did Common Core. There was also a data warehouse bill that was introduced, and when you combine the data warehouse bill with the implications of this committee, then you get the seamless profile of a South Carolina graduate from cradle to the grave. They even want to, Representative Rita Allison even talks about merging all the data silos. So we have the elementary silos with all the elementary data, then we've got the secondary and the post-secondary, and they want to merge everything, so it's seamless. The voters of South Carolina did speak loud and clear last year with a question on the ballot regarding constitutional amendment to appoint the state superintendent of education, and it was voted down. So people want to be in charge and elect who runs education in the state of South Carolina. Oh, I'm running over to my computer for this one, but this is a video of her saying what I was just mentioning.
One of the things that the bill does is coordinate efforts to know where our 0 to 5 population actually is. Right now, we have such a hodgepodge of a system. Some children in public, some in private, some in a combination of the two, some with First Steps, some with faith-based, some in-home, and they all have different degrees of accountability, and really, truly no one group is following where these children are. A plan for our children to look at their lives and look at the state of South Carolina and look at our job force and look at the companies that we're going to bring and take a holistic approach to what we're going to offer them in their career moves. It's very important that we look at the holistic child from 0 up. Am I standing here as a proponent for taking infants into public schools? No. I'm telling you that our families deserve our support in all of those different groups, no matter where they choose to educate their children, but that we have a responsibility to know where they are, to account for them, and to know where they're going and how they're doing so that we can measure the progress. If we do not measure it, it will not get done.
So that's straight from her mouth. There were several others who said very similar things, but that was the best video that I thought that was the best. So I wanted to share that with you so you can see firsthand what they talk about when they're down there debating education. So this is the fiscal impact, and like I showed you to begin with, just this first page, this first part right here is just the fiscal impact. This is something that Representative Jonathan Hill did from Anderson County, and it shows you the bottom there is the total. It's at $94 million right now, and still climbing, most of which is recurring. Representative Jonathan Hill contacted Anderson County School District, and they reported that the requirements would be at least $2 million in unfunded mandates, and there are still many undetermined costs in the bill. And Jonathan Hill was the only Republican who voted against it. Added testing. So this section of the bill is about the Read to Succeed initiative. And Read to Succeed was signed into law by Nikki Haley, which required 90 minutes of reading intervention daily using the failed Common Core standards, which consists of 50% literary and 50% informational, which they're now calling literary nonfiction, I believe. So the bill would require additional reading intervention on top of the 90 minutes that's already in place with the Read to Succeed initiative. It requires summer reading camps for first and second graders because currently there's summer camps in third grade, but they want to catch children before they get to the third grade. It develops an online reporting system to monitor and track students and more reading intervention. And I'm just going to reiterate that with the reading intervention, they're continuing to use the experimental failed Common Core standards. So you can have all programs you want, but without addressing the fundamental problem with the standards, I don't see it fixing anything. And Senator Greg Hembry, yesterday, I watched the Senate Education Committee meeting. They met yesterday morning, and he called Read to Succeed an experiment, and he also said that it was not successful because local school districts were not implementing it with integrity. So they brag about removing the tests, But all they did was remove any tests that were not required by the federal government. And then you also have district testing. So the added testing is districts will have to test children at the first of the year and up to 2 more times that year, each year. Districts can be reimbursed for this stuff once they submit the test data that is used in the progress monitoring system, and reimbursement is only contingent upon funding provided by the General Assembly. So it's probably going to end up being tons of unfunded mandates. The bill requires new accountability sanctions for teachers, school districts, and schools. They're being held to these faulty standards, and it's immoral. I mean, what's even worse is that the children are being strapped to these standards. And Sandra Stotsky, who's on our advisory board, she was on the validation committee, she actually wrote the pre-Common Core Massachusetts standards that were #1 in the nation and #4 globally before they abandoned those to adopt Common Core. And she has this to say about the overall English language arts standards, Common Core standards. The vocabulary, reading, and literature standards point to no particular level of reading difficulty, little cultural knowledge, and few intellectual objectives. They require no British literature aside from one work by Shakespeare, and no authors from the ancient world or selected pieces from the Bible as literature, so students can learn about their influence on American and English literature. They also do not require the history of the English language. Without these requirements in these areas, students will likely not be prepared for college coursework or active informed citizenship or critical thinking in any English-speaking country. So that is what Sandra Stotsky had to say about the Common Core English Language Arts standards. Competency-based education, we actually have a handout for this, and we have a few handouts over there, so before you leave, please be sure to get some of our information. But competency-based education embeds online adaptive assessments in everyday learning, which undermine the privacy of the child, and it eliminates the parent's opportunity to opt out of any tests. The child's computer collects data with every keystroke, and what I mean by adaptive assessments is each child sits down at a computer and each child doesn't necessarily have the same set of questions, and the next question that the child is asked is based on their answer to the previous question. So, and teachers, I'm not sure what would happen with teachers if this was implemented, because they would no longer teach, but facilitate. This slide I put up here just to show you the support behind it, the Republican-led support. So Governor McMaster said just over a month ago that he would sign, he said to Speaker of the House Jay Lucas and Senator Greg Henry, "Send me these reforms and I will sign them into law." And the primary sponsor of the House bill was the chair of the K-12 subcommittee, Ray Felder, and the primary sponsor of the Senate bill is the Education Committee Chair, Greg Henry. So it carries a ton of weight to have these big names on this bill. Amendment 33, this is some good news. So in the House bill, we worked with Representative Josiah Magnuson to get an amendment in that would require a legislative cost analysis for federal compliance. So this did pass the House, and that means that it would require the Legislative Audit Council to see how much money we spend complying with federal regulations. So we only get a small percentage of federal money, but we have to comply with all of these demands, and you go to the state level and they wash their hands of it, say there's nothing we can do. And this is some more great news, we have a proposed Senate amendment that would repeal Common Core. So this amendment requires new standards to be written, and the new standards must align with the assessment, the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. The Iowa Test of Basic Skills has a wide, long-standing reputation. It's been around since 1935, and it has been taken by a large number of students, both nationally and internationally. So there's evidence. It's evidence-based. It's not an experiment. The starting framework for the new standards, if this were to pass, would be the pre-Common Core Massachusetts standards that I referenced earlier that were written by Sandra Stotsky. And this amendment would repeal Common Core. So some steps that the legislature can take to improve government schools. The black words are taken from the bill, and we kind of just changed the wording a little bit to make it appropriate. So to restore local control, to really restore local control and foster innovation, the state should wean itself off of federal funds, beginning with the cost analysis. So we want to get this in the Senate bill. To foster accountability and decentralization of education, the state should eliminate the Education Oversight Committee and allow the State Board of Education members to be elected. And to achieve statewide educational excellence, yes, the goal of the House bill, this language was taken from the bill, the state should abandon the workforce development model of education and return to an evidence-based classical education. And we have handouts that have these talking points on them, so you can contact your senator. Ways that you can help, yes. Call, email, write your senator, let them know. We have the amendments down here that are also on a handout. And I'll tell you, yesterday the Senate Education Committee met, and at the end, they talked about meeting again next week. And Senator Greg Henry said he wanted to get it on the calendar for this year. But we talked to Senator Rice, who said that they're going to meet, it's still in committee, so they're going to meet again probably next week to talk about it again, and at that point it may be voted out of committee and then be in the full Senate. So now is the time to contact your senator, even if they're not on the education committee, because they will see this next week. You can go to our website too, USPIE.org, and sign up. That will go to me, and I'll add you to our mailing list so you can get some updates and respond to any action items. And you can email me. My email address is afu@uspie.org if you have any questions or ideas you want to help out. We are co-sponsoring a free event on May 22nd. We've got some information about that as well. It's in Columbia, South Carolina. One of our advisory board members, Alex Newman, he is the international news correspondent for the New American, and he's going to be speaking. His summer tour is Rescuing Our Children and Our Nation, and he's traveling the country talking about the very stuff that I just talked on, but he's much more knowledgeable, as his book that he wrote was the first book I ever read on education. So he knows a lot more about it than I do, but it's very exciting. You can go to USPIE.org, and the registration is right there on the front page. What's his name? Alex Newman. We have the New American Magazine special education report that he did. If you want to get one of those magazines, I encourage you to, as long as you promise that you'll read it. It's really good information. And speaking of that, we brought some books, The Long War and Common Core by Donna Hearn. I don't know, Donna Hearn is the founder of the Constitutional Coalition, and they have their annual education policy conferences in St. Louis, Missouri. But I am almost done with that book as well, and I highly encourage that. You can take one if you promise you will read it. And I just wanted to share a picture of my child, because this is why I do this. That's Lily Mae, and I want to save her from all the stuff that I just talked about. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to share this information.
So much, April. This was so informative, and I concur with everything she says. We fought the education reform package back when I was on the school board under Goals 2000, and it is just coming back. It's repackaged like it always is. And it does have its roots in Marxism. And I'm sorry, we just shouldn't be handing our children over to big business and workforce development. Our children And their education is far more important than that. We care about our kids, and we really care about Lily Mae. She's cute. Does anyone have any questions for April? We'll just take a few questions, and then we'll wrap up.
One question is you have they want to elect school board at the state level. Why not include school boards at all levels?
The local school boards are already elected.
Well, if they are, it's almost been a secret.
Well, I think my view is that a lot of the school board races are rigged to where they only get, most of the time, only the candidates that the establishment wants in there.
That would be probably the experience that I have observed over a fairly short period of time. So perhaps something needs to be done so that doesn't occur. And I'm sure there's some structure that could be put in place.
Thank you. The state school board is appointed positions, and they're hand-selected basically, and so is the Education Oversight Committee. I was on the Education Oversight Committee, and I gave everybody heartburn, and I didn't stay there very long. So.
I just want to follow up a little bit on this electing the State Board of Education, because this is a new initiative for USPIE, and it's going to take some time to inform the public about the benefit of this. And it's going to require a constitutional amendment, because right now it's in the Constitution that they are politically appointed, as Julie said. And so what happens is these 16 members are people that are owed favors by politicians who supported their campaign, and they're typically related to the State Department of Education. It's a rubber stamp machine. So we believe that there will be better local control and accountability for taxpayers and parents if we elect the 16 members of the State Board of Education. So we're going to be talking all summer going into the fall all over the state about this, and we hope that you'll support this initiative, because it will take 2/3 majority to pass a constitutional a question for the ballot for a constitutional amendment.
Thank you, Sherry. We have a question over here about Patty. Did you want to add anything, April?
I just want to make a comment about elections for school board members. Because they're nonpartisan, that is the biggest problem. School board races should be Republican or Democrat. They should have to associate with a party so you knew a little bit about the person running. If not, you have no clue what their true character is as a person. But one thing I wanted to ask, my grandchildren are all in public school, and I know that they're using their little laptop computers. And it alarms me that you can't pick up a book anymore that you can check and see what they're reading. You can't look and see what they're learning in history. You have to go through that whole computer tablet to find out what they're doing. So how exactly are they tracking each child with that little laptop computer with all their...
Absolutely, absolutely.
And that's
Especially
right.
when all tests and all surveys, I heard a first grader, I take my child to ballet and I hang around these kids, and I heard a first grader saying something about, she asked me if my computer that I had was a touchscreen. I said, yeah, it does this, and she said, oh, my Chromebook isn't. And I said, oh, you have Chromebooks? And she said, yeah, we do our work on there and we take surveys. And I didn't ask, but her mother wasn't around. I wanted to ask what was on the survey. What is on those surveys? But her mom wasn't around, so I didn't probe, but yeah, it's very disturbing.
And the other thing that bothers me as a grandparent, you don't want your grandchildren connected or your children connected to laptops all the time. And it's really inducing them to be to a device 24/7. And I think that's overstimulation for technology, and I think see real danger in that.
Good point. Beth? Okay. How many questions? We got Jill and Annette and Beth. We'll do these 3 questions, make them concise, and then we'll let April go home, okay?
Are you familiar with the all-in that's supposed to take place in Columbia within the next 4 week where all the teachers?
Yes, ma'am, yes, next Wednesday on May 1st, all the teachers are walking out and they'll
Right.
start at the State Department and march to the.
Will that leave the schools, I mean, other schools doing anything about the fact that the teachers are probably
Well,
not?
I actually saw something this morning, it was a letter from the Chester County, thank you, Chester County School District Superintendent, who wrote a letter to, I guess, all teachers, staff, faculty, parents, everyone, letting them know that all Chester County schools will be closed on May 1st so that all the teachers could go to the march. I haven't heard of a school district who is opposing it. I haven't seen that. But that's the first that I saw of someone letting teachers off or having involvement as a Title B.
Hopefully they're talking about what you're talking about and not just it's more about funding, isn't it?
The march is for more funding, smaller class sizes, and teacher pay raises, yes, which really doesn't address the fundamental problem. I mean, I think we can address that, but it's not the root issue.
Okay. This is getting back to the curriculum. I know when we were in Delaware, they were pushing for language over phonics. And I remember talking to a college student. She told me when she got to college, it was so difficult because she never had enough phonics to be able to learn all these new words and understand. And yet, our state of Delaware, 15 years later, is giving awards to those schools that only teach whole language. Is this part of the common?
Yes. Common Core uses a hybrid, so that I guess they can't say they completely got rid of phonics. But yes, they use a hybrid between phonics and whole language. Or what is it, read, say, cite, say. There's so many words. I've actually been reading a lot about that lately when I've been getting into all of this. So it's very good that you bring that up.
I have a question, then I have a comment. What advice would you give to PTA? You know, the schools have the PTA, which I don't think they utilize as much as they, you know, the meetings usually are quarterly or once a month, and parents really don't, I mean, they have a lot of power they don't even realize that they have, because if parents are unhappy, they need to let the principal know. So what advice would you give to parents attending their local PTAs?
If you guys don't mind, would really like my mother-in-law, Sherry, to address this question. On the top of my head, I don't know what advice I would give for the PTA, but she may have a few words to share.
Well, my opinion of PTA is not very high. When my children were in school, and I'm dating myself, this is my son that she's married to is 27. So yeah. So when they were in school and I was involved with PTA, I was also involved in so many other things, wanted to be involved. When my kids were in school is what motivated me to start Parents Involved in Education, because I was disturbed about curriculum content. But when I expressed my concern over curriculum content, I was shut out. And I was not allowed to be involved in those decisions. The only decisions the only involvement they wanted from me through the PTA was to do fundraising for the school and to make sure that my child did all of their homework and etc. So really PTAs are structured around fundraising for the schools, and it's not about curriculum content or any of the issues that we've been discussing. So really, for a parent that has concerns, we encourage them to go to our website, join the movement, get connected with USPIE. It's an alternative parent organization that can empower you to make a difference in your child's school. And let me just finish by saying that the current climate of government schools, we don't recommend anyone place their child in government schools. It's unfortunate, it's sad. We know you have relatives that are in these schools, but we recommend homeschooling until we're able to right the issue.
Sorry, I just wanted to comment. I'm actually
actually a mom of 4 children in the public school system and heavily involved in the PTA. And I agree, I think there needs to be more of a focus on this. And I only have elementary and middle schoolers at this time, but I do see that it is a by-school PTA. Because I know in one of those schools, there's a legislative chair position that every PTA has to have in every school, whatever. And sometimes that role just never gets filled because it has to be the right person with that skill set. So I do think that that's something we should emphasize, that we should, work on finding people who can be those positions in the PTA. And they're invited to every executive PTA board meeting, which is monthly, and they can present this information and these resources to the school, the principals there, and to let them know that these are issues that our legislators need to, hear from parents and faculty. So I just want to let you guys know that.
That's excellent. Thank you for that.
Yes, great point.
Yeah, it's very
There's plenty of opportunity to get involved. And you know the Senate bill number, and you know your senators. You need to contact your state senators on this. Frankly, our House members, Republican and Democrat, passed this thing through like a freight train. So our good guys voted for this too. And I think it's out of ignorance, to tell you the truth.
And I've been messaging some of those conservative House members and sharing some of this information a little bit at a time, not aggressively, politely, but just showing how important and educating them, because it seems that they don't know either.